The AP and college professors love to ask questions about absolute and comparative advantage in both multiple choice and open response type questions. Let's dive into strategies to answer these questions quickly and accurately. Hi, I'm Mr. Racine. Welcome to today's episode of
Economics videos that don't suck.
Legal disclaimer. This video assumes you already have a solid grasp of the concepts and theories of absolute and comparative advantage. If you're still feeling shaky on the topic, I strongly urge you to go back and check out the previous video before soldiering on. The good news is that there really are only a couple of different ways the AP or your professor can test you on comparative advantage and absolute advantage. Generally speaking, the questions are set up like this. So you have two people or two economies, and there's two products that they can produce or two services that they can provide. For example, we have two employees, TJ and Dexter, and two tasks, waxing snowboard bases and sharpening snowboard edges. The setup to this question is always like this and is usually given to you in one of three different ways, which we'll look at in a second. But for multiple choice questions, the answers almost always look like this. A. TJ has an absolute advantage in both waxing bases and sharpening edges. Dexter has a comparative advantage in both waxing bases and sharpening edges. B. TJ has an absolute advantage in waxing bases and a comparative advantage in sharpening edges. And Dexter has an absolute advantage in By the time I get halfway through reading answer B, I'm ready to just jam a pencil in my own ear to end the misery of it all, which is exactly the response that the AP or your professor is hoping to elicit. For that reason, I suggest you generally ignore the answers to these types of questions, as it's often quicker to set up your own answer matrix like I'll show you, then find the answer from the provided solutions that matches your own. So here's how we set up the matrix. These questions are almost always trying to get you to figure out who has the absolute or comparative advantage in one or both goods. Because there are two people and two products, and the opportunity cost for one product is measured in terms of another product, I get super confused easily on these types of questions, right? So I set up a matrix like this every time. On top, we have good A and good B, or service A and service B. And on the side, I put absolute advantage and comparative advantage. I know ultimately I'm going to write the name of a person or an economy in each box inside the matrix here. Whoever goes in here has the absolute advantage in producing good A. Whoever goes in here has the comparative advantage in producing good B. That way I can just keep it all straight in my head. The first and easiest, and thus the most rare question that you might see on an AP or college exam, could be a question like this. If you get a question like this, which gives you the opportunity cost of producing one good or completing one service directly, then you know immediately who has the comparative advantage in which good. Remember, comparative advantage is the ability to produce at a lower opportunity cost. So Dexter can wax bases at a lower opportunity cost. He's only giving up 2 snowboard edge sharpening versus 3 snowboard edge sharpening for TJ. He has a lower opportunity cost, so he has a comparative advantage in waxing bases. Similarly, TJ can sharpen edges at a lower opportunity cost, so he has the comparative advantage in sharpening edges. Note that we have no idea about who has the absolute advantage in waxing bases or sharpening edges with this type of question because we actually don't know how long it takes either one of them to perform either task. And as a result, we can find our answer here. The second and most often set up is like this, where the question tells you how many things they can make in a certain amount of time or with a certain amount of resources. Okay, so for example, TJ can wax 1 snowboard base in an hour or can sharpen the edges of 3 snowboards in an hour. Dexter can wax 2 snowboard bases in an hour or sharpen the edges of 4 snowboards in an hour. But that setup right there is actually the exact same as this setup. And that setup is also the exact same as this setup. To solve these, we need to figure out who has the absolute advantage and comparative advantage in each good. First, who has the absolute advantage in which good? In these questions, whoever can produce more in a certain amount of time has the absolute advantage. Here, Dexter has the absolute advantage in both services because he can wax more bases and sharpen more edges in 1 hour. To calculate who has the comparative advantage in each good, you need to calculate the opportunity cost of producing each good. Again, as showed in a previous video, here's how we do it. For Dexter, the opportunity cost of waxing 2 bases is sharpening 4 edges. We want to calculate the opportunity cost of waxing 1 base, so we use Kung Fu Algebra, which gives us the opportunity cost of 1 snowboard base to be 2 snowboard edges. I can do the same calculation from the PPC, or from this table, or from the word problem. For TJ, the opportunity cost of 1 snowboard base is 3 snowboard edges. We don't even need Algebra Taekwondo to solve this one. So Dexter gives up sharpening 2 snowboard edges when he waxes a base, and TJ gives up 3 snowboard edges for the same task. So Dexter has the comparative advantage in waxing snowboard bases. Because of the math, the moment you calculate who has the comparative advantage in one good, you instantaneously know that the other person in the economy has the comparative advantage in the other good. And you're done. Or if you want to check your work, you can, like this. This is when I recommend you finally comb your way through the potential answers, quickly eliminating ones when something doesn't match your matrix, and choosing the only one that can match what you have found completely. So in this case, the answer must be... The final and trickiest, but not really that tricky, way that these questions can be presented is by giving you not the quantity that can be produced in a certain amount of time, but by giving you the amount of time it takes to produce 1 unit of a good. For example, it takes TJ 2 hours to clean the wax machine and 3 hours to tune the ski sharpener. It takes Dexter 3 hours to clean the wax machine and 4 hours to tune the ski sharpener. So this is the same question as before, but now they're not telling you how many wax machines they can clean in an hour, but how many hours it takes to clean 1 wax machine. So the trick here is to realize that if TJ needs 2 hours to clean a wax machine, then he can clean 1/2 of a wax machine, 1/2, in 1 hour. If it takes him 3 hours to tune a ski sharpener, then he can tune 1/3 of a ski sharpener in 1 hour. Similarly, Dexter can clean 1/3 of a wax machine in an hour and 1/4 of a ski sharpener in 1 hour. Now we can see right away that TJ has the absolute advantage in both goods. He can clean a greater percentage of the wax machine in the hour. He can tune a greater proportion of the sharpener in an hour. We can then solve for opportunity cost in the exact same way as we did in the last question. For TJ, the opportunity cost of 1/2 of a wax machine is 1/3 of a ski sharpener. In 1 hour, he can clean 1/2 of a wax machine. If he didn't use that hour to clean 1/2 of a wax machine, he could have tuned 1/3 of a ski sharpener. Using algebra, the opportunity cost of 1 wax machine is then 2/3 of a ski sharpener for TJ. For Dexter, using the same approach, the opportunity cost of 1 wax machine is 3/4 of a ski sharpener. 3/4 is bigger than 2/3, so TJ has the comparative advantage in cleaning wax machines, as he does it at a lower opportunity cost. And again, once we know that, we also automatically know that Dexter has the comparative advantage in tuning ski sharpeners. The key to this last, trickier version of the question is this first step of converting hours per task to units of task completed per hour by simply taking the first number and dividing it into 1. One final question that you might get. Let's go back to the waxing bases and sharpening edges example. TJ is sharpening edges and Dexter is waxing bases because that's what they have a comparative advantage in. Let's say that each of them has a lot of snowboards of their own and they want to engage in trade. TJ will sharpen some edges for Dexter if Dexter waxes some bases for TJ. What exchange rate would make it worthwhile for both of them? Dexter is waxing bases, and the opportunity cost of waxing 1 snowboard base is 2 edge sharpenings. So when he waxes some snowboard bases for TJ, he needs to get at least 2 edges sharpened by TJ in exchange. Otherwise, he could just do it himself with that hour that it took. He will wax one base, but he needs to get at least 2 sharpenings in return. One base for at least 2 sharpenings. TJ is sharpening edges, so the opportunity cost of sharpening the edge of one snowboard is 1/3 of a snowboard base. So he needs to get at least 1/3 of a snowboard base waxed from TJ for every set of edges that he sharpens. But this is the same as saying he'll sharpen 3 edge sets in return for at least 1 base waxing. And this is also the same as saying he will at most sell 3 edge sharpenings to get 1 base waxing in return. So TJ will at most sharpen 3 edges in return for 1 base waxing, which is not coincidentally the opportunity cost of 1 base waxing for TJ. So it appears the exchange rate needs to fall somewhere in between 1 to 2 and 1 to 3. So for these types of questions, once you've calculated the opportunity cost of producing one good for each person in the economy, the mutually beneficial exchange rate needs to fall in between those 2 opportunity costs for both to benefit. There's 3 different ways you could get these types of questions. My strategy is to use the matrix, regardless of the question type, open response, multiple choice, solve who has the comparative advantage in each good, who has the absolute advantage in each good. For questions where they give you the opportunity cost directly, whoever has the lower opportunity cost has the comparative advantage. For questions where they give you the amount that they can produce in a certain amount of time or with a certain amount of resources, whoever can produce more has the absolute advantage. Calculate opportunity cost by setting the endpoints of the PPC, or the maximum values that they can produce when only producing that good, and solving one of them for 1. Whoever has the lowest opportunity cost of producing a good has the comparative advantage in that good. For questions that give you the amount of time it takes you to produce 1 unit, take the inverse of that number, 1 divided by, to get the quantity of that unit that can be produced in 1 unit of time. Then solve in the exact same way. Hey, what's going on? I hope you liked this video and it helped clarify some of the stuff you're working on in your current economics studies. If you're looking for more resources to help you with AP Economics, IB Economics, Intro-Level University Economics, economics teaching resources, 1, go check out our website, Economics Videos That Don't Suck, evtds.com, for access to our entire catalog of economics videos, as well as practice questions, answers, and even entire mock exams. 2, be sure to subscribe to this channel, Economics Videos That Don't Suck, so you can get immediate access to all of our new videos as they're released, probably mirroring your economic studies right now.